Michael Saylor made an announcement this morning that may confirm he made a huge mistake and he's trying to fix it. He's been getting in a lot of heat recently, and this latest decision could potentially throw even more gas on that fire. But what does this mean for MSTR shareholders? And of course, what does this mean for Bitcoin in general? We will get into it. So obviously, you guys know Saylor's been in the news for the last 2-3 weeks, ever since he sold 32 Bitcoin. It really has been sort of, I would say maybe a dumpster fire, maybe. Actually, as Nico pointed out to me earlier, it really started with the Danny Knowles podcast that was months ago. But anyways, let's get into the latest decision. So obviously, on first read, it's just another Saylor buy, right? We're seeing on Twitter, Saylor did another buy. He did the dots. More dots equals more better. But he announced that Strategy increased its U.S. dollar reserves by $300 million to $1.4 billion and plans to continue replenishing it to support the credit quality of its digital credit securities, or the Stretch product. He also announced that they acquired 520 Bitcoin for $35 million, increasing their Bitcoin holdings to 847,363. So you're probably reading this and being like, Opti, what are we talking about here? Well, it's how he funded those USD reserves, which is leading back to the controversy we were covering last week. So to fund these reserves, Saylor did an at-the-market sales of the MSTR and sold 2,714 839 MSTR shares for approximately that $300 million. Now, as you know, there's been a huge controversy recently on the Bitcoin per shares. It's actually two controversies in regards to the Stretch product. And I will cover where the Stretch price is. Hasn't fully rebounded yet, but it looks like these decisions by Strategy are, in fact, just trying to protect the digital credit narrative. And of course, as we all know, narratives drive kind of the liquidity and the price currently. And like I said last week when we were covering this, and you guys did yell at me a little bit. Like I said last week, it's not so much that the math is bad. It's not so much that this product's going to blow up per se. It's really more of a confidence issue. And again, in the last week, Saylor and Strategy, I'm going to use those interchangeable. When I say Saylor, I mean Strategy and vice versa. He's been in 3 controversies in the last week. Again, sold some Bitcoin. There is the Bitcoin per share kind of argument, controversy, and then, of course, the Stretch depegging, as everyone has been calling it. Well, we're going back to number 2. We're back to the Bitcoin per share conversation. Now, I forget what the number was last week, but you can see here Bitcoin per share in sats is currently at 218,046. If I remember correctly, last week when we were covering this is around 220. So the Bitcoin per share is continuing to go down at least week to week, though we've heard Fong Li, the CEO of Strategy, basically come out here and say, hey, look, we're not necessarily thinking in terms of week to week. We're thinking in terms of year to year. And then, of course, 4, 5, 10 years down the line. But the Bitcoin per share has continued to go down in the last weeks to protect the Stretch product. Now, what is interesting, as you can see, last week we were covering the idea that it did sound like Saylor was saying, hey, look, we have 847 plus thousand coins. We're totally willing to use our entire stack to protect the dividend payments, and that would equal this 32 years of dividend coverage in Bitcoin terms. Basically saying, if we sold all of our Bitcoin, we can cover these dividend payments for 32 years. Everyone's hearing this, and it's like, yo, the buyer of last resort is basically now telling us that he's going to dump his Bitcoin to protect this digital credit product. Like, this is not good. Well, last week when we were covering the story, the big controversy was Saylor had about $2 billion on hand in cash. They used about $1.5 billion to pay back their bond convert for, I believe it was 2028. Basically took off some debt on the books, and it dwindled their USD reserves to about 7 months. From 2 years to 7 months. And I think that was the catalyst to really spook the market. I think that's why the Stretch product went so low. Again, it's not a peg, it's just a par number. So a lot of people, as I was covering last week, are thinking of the stretch product like a stable coin that, oh man, it depegged from $100. It's completely over. It's not really how the product works. It did get to its lowest point ever of around $82. And a lot of people were saying that that's probably because that 2-year cushion got pushed down to 7 months, and it kind of spooked the market. They're like, wow, okay, the math is starting to not math for us. The risk is starting to really be highlighted. Now, there was a concern of whether Saylor over-engineered the products over there. Did he over-engineer the MSTR product? Is strategy over its skis? You know, did this whole video of Saylor saying, hey, I created the stretch product with the AI, like, is this all really bad optics right now? Well, it looks like this week he is trying to fix that. And now you can see with this $300 million cash raise, their dividend is basically back up to 10 months. So they are, in fact, trying to build their dollar reserves to protect the stretch product. But, and this is the big but, it is seemingly at the expense of MSTR stockholders, which is, it's basically a dilution here. He's diluting the Bitcoin per share so that he can protect the stretch product. And I have the strategy purchases over here, and you can see here, 622. So the announcement we saw this morning, it is in fact making the Bitcoin yield year to date, or the Bitcoin per share, go down. As you see, beginning of this month, it was at 13, currently at 11.8. So everyone really pinpointing this idea that, yes, in fact, they are week to week, as of now, diluting the MSTR holders to protect the stretch product. Now, if you are an MSTR holder, maybe you don't really care because year to year, or year over year, the Bitcoin per share has increased. So if you're looking at this from, okay, I've been holding strategy from last year, or MSTR from last year to this year, I'm in the green. But if maybe you're a newer holder of MSTR, you're looking at this and you're like, what's going on here? This is actually not benefiting me. It seems like they're going down a dark path. It seems as if they are going to sacrifice the MSTR common share stockholder for the digital credit product. And obviously, we've all heard him talk about the stretch product as being the iPhone moment, the killer app for Bitcoin. And on the surface, or rather, maybe not on the surface, if you do dive a little deeper here, obviously, Saylor didn't come out here and admit, yes, I was wrong. But what you are seeing right now is he's listening to the market. He realized that that $1.5 billion bond convert was potentially a mistake that spooked the market. And now they're trying to reverse course. Maybe basically what we saw on last week in terms of the stretch product depeg. Again, I'm going to use the term depeg just because that's kind of what resonates with everyone. I think the market was basically telling strategy and Saylor that, look, we think you can pay back the dividends on this stretch product at 11.5% yield, but this 7-month cushion doesn't make me feel good, especially since we're in a bear market. I think the market was a lot more comfortable with that 2-year cushion here. And it seems like they're trying to do what they can to get that USD reserves back up to that 2-year mark. And, you know, I had to pull back a little bit on this show. I was going to go way harder. But if you're looking at the MSTR stock right now, and Nico was saying this a little while ago, that it's starting to look like it might be getting in the buy range here. Current price for the MSTR stock is $110. Will it get back? Yeah, will it get back to the 2021 high of like $70? I mean, it's kind of happening. It's kind of happening. So that's the initial kind of idea with the MSTR stock. Before I get into updating you on what happened with the STRC price or DPEG, I think we got to just talk about here. I know a lot of people out there that are, how do I even put it nicely? You know, suit coiners, MSTR, maxis. They're probably looking at this and being like, look, okay, on a week-to-week basis, on a year-to-date basis, it is making the Bitcoin per share, the Bitcoin yield go down. But it is, as Saylor said, making the digital credit rating go up. So does this necessarily mean you shouldn't be holding the MSTR stock? I do what you want with your money, but it does look like the MSTR stock price right now is dare I say, in a free fall. It does look like the Bitcoin treasury bubble, in quotes, might be coming to a close. And as I was saying last week, it does seem in the bottom of this bear market, or at least close to the bottom, who knows exactly, that people are looking for a metaphorical sacrifice. People are looking for someone to claim to be like, okay, that was the final bottom. That was the final capitulation. And I think this is where we are right now. When you're in a bear market, Bitcoiners fight. And I think Saylor's been so publicly a figurehead for Bitcoin that now, the masses, the plebs, the mobs are out there with their pitchforks just trying to find someone to blame for the very bad price action. And I think this is kind of where we are. But Saylor, or strategy, like I said, interchangeable. It does look like they, in fact, at least this month, have diluted the Bitcoin per share for the MSTR stockholders. So if you are an MSTR holder, if you've been holding for multiple years, maybe you don't care. If you got caught in the Bitcoin treasury hype cycle, you probably care a lot more. Do I think it's over? Not at all. I think the math, they'll figure it out. But it isn't, dude, another controversy. It's Monday. Saylor's in a little more heat. Anyways, Nico, it's good to have you back, man. It's been a minute, and we're throwing you straight into the fire. We're getting a little spicy with Saylor this morning. So what is your thoughts hearing this?
Yeah, first of all, happy to be back. I was traveling. I was in Europe last week, so I was not able to participate in the show, but happy to be back in the hot seat. Look, my thoughts on this are simple. This is just a normal bear market playing out how a normal bear market plays out. Every single bear market in Bitcoin, again, there's you see these capitulation events. And I told you guys in October.
Is it a capitulation event though, dude?
Listen, so you see these capitulation events, right? And, I think the reason that Michael Saylor's in the limelight is because he is, the figurehead of Bitcoin in Wall Street. And he has had to, walk back a lot of the ultimate statements that he's saying, basically saying like, look, like the reality is you never sell your Bitcoin to, hey, you sell your Bitcoin, just make sure you have more Bitcoin than the day before. And this is something that we've all gone through as Bitcoiners, especially if you've been in the industry for a long time, right? It's part of the course, right? So I think the big question on everybody's minds, and there's been a lot of Bitcoiners kind of beating the battle drum on this specific topic, like, is strategy done? Is Michael Saylor done? No, absolutely not. I don't think so. I think that if you're a strategy shareholder, once they started their Bitcoin accumulation strategy, no pun intended, back in 2021 when he announced it at the Bitcoin conference, you're a very happy shareholder. The share was at $12, went all the way up to $500. You made a amazing return on your investment, right? Even with Bitcoin down 50% the way it is, even with strategy down, the way it is, you're still up roughly 10x or so. That's still a fantastic investment from 2021 to 2026.
I mean, that's more than Bitcoin, right?
Right. So it's a 10x investment. So I've said it on the show publicly. I think strategy under $100 is very compelling, even though I'm not a stonk buyer. But regarding, let's pivot the conversation back to like dilution and stuff like that. I mean, him and Jack had a crazy back and forth at the at the BTC Prague conference when they were just again going back and forth on the they're going back and forth on the like, look, are you just diluting your investors just to buy more Bitcoin? And the answer to that could be yes. Ultimately, I think this cycle, what it's going to prove is, do you have an underlying business that's generating cash flow for your company? I think Bitcoin is part of your business strategy. I wouldn't say that Bitcoin is the strategy, right? And I'll give an example of that. What do I mean by that? So if you look at SpaceX, and I tweeted this out yesterday, and I said Elon is a Bitcoiner. Unpopular opinion: Elon is a Bitcoiner.
Dude, stealing my tweets. That's crazy.
If you look at SpaceX, SpaceX IPO'd and has a larger market cap of Bitcoin, and SpaceX holds a significant amount of Bitcoin, and they just became quietly the 8th largest Bitcoin treasury company. The fundamental difference between SpaceX and, for example, a company like Strategy is that SpaceX is generating cash flow that has nothing to do with Bitcoin, and they're choosing to put some of that cash flow into Bitcoin. I would say that most businesses, that's the business model, right? Is you generate cash flow and then you put some of those reserves into Bitcoin. You could put all of your reserves into Bitcoin, but that's how a business is generally run, right? You generate cash flow and then you get to decide what you do with that cash flow. Do you leave it in fiat to melting ice cube, or do you put some of that fiat into Bitcoin, which again is a superior asset? That's the way that it should be done. I think the way that Strategy did it is that they built their entire business off accumulating Bitcoin, right? And how viable is that long term? I think that's a question that has yet to be answered. But that is Saylor's strategy right now. That's his business model. His business model is leveraging the financial markets, using a little bit of financial engineering to generate, I guess, provide a return on investment for his investors, right? Like that's his business model, right? He does have an underlying software business, but does it generate enough cash flow, enough revenue in order for it to justify the valuation of the stock? I can't really answer that question. I will say that if you look at Saylor's average price per coin, which is roughly in the 70K range, right now, even though he's been accumulating Bitcoin for 5 years, technically Strategy is underwater on their Bitcoin investments, but their stock is up, right? So that tells me that the market is bullish, is still bullish on Strategy. Like until their price of their stock reaches back to the $12, $14 range, clearly the market is indicating that they're bullish on the future of Strategy. Markets ultimately are forward looking, right? Like they take all of this into account. They're betting on the future of MicroStrategy. And right now, currently it's at $122. Now, back to the stretch product. And again, this goes back to a little bit of like the branding and the marketing associated with it. They're really hell bent and proud of Stretch holding that $100 price level. And
that's literally, it was sold on low volatility and it had an extremely volatile week.
So if it's paying, 11.5% return, but the stock is down 12%, you're basically break even, if not just a little bit underwater, right? But this goes back to like the initial thesis, which is like ultimately what is a business? A business is meant to generate cash flow. And then what you do with that cash flow is your decision, right? A lot of these treasury companies didn't have the revenue or the cash flow to justify the valuations that they got in the previous bull market. I think a lot of people, the euphoric mania really got unfocused. It got focused from the kind of Bitcoin treasury aspect of things. From the spot Bitcoin price, and it got focused to the Bitcoin treasury companies. But then when reality hit and you start looking at the numbers, you're like, wait a second, does this justify the valuations that these companies have? And what this bear market has shown, which bear markets ultimately do, what they do is they just, cleanse the forest, so to speak. It's showing that the market doesn't have confidence that a lot of these treasury companies are valued at what they're valued at. And if you look at some of the treasury companies, without naming names, they're actually valued less than the amount of Bitcoin that they're holding, which then begs the question, why should I be holding Bitcoin why should I be holding Bitcoin if I could just be holding
No, why should I hold this treasury?
Why should I be holding this stonk if I could just be holding spot Bitcoin? Like, what's the benefit there, right? And you could make an argument, and Saylor has made this argument that essentially, like, what strategy is it's a levered play on Bitcoin. So if the price of Bitcoin goes to the moon, then in theory, strategy's price should outperform it. But because it is a levered bet on Bitcoin, once the Bitcoin price falls 50%, strategy is going to fall way harder, right? So yeah, I mean, I think the reason that Saylor's getting so much heat, and personally, I'm a fan of Saylor. I'm on camp Saylor. I think he's done a tremendous good for the industry, like tremendous good for the industry. I would say that a lot of it has come down to his marketing. A lot of it has come down to the claims that he's made. And those claims are now coming back, and, you know, they're not making them look too great, right? I think that's ultimately what it comes down to, is like, never sell your Bitcoin. Yes, the stretch is going to stay at $100. The answer on the Danny Knowles podcast, and then, 2 or 3 or 4 months later, Bitcoin humbles you like it humbles everybody else, right? And this is the situation that we're in right now. Is, this is a bear market. Ultimately, every single bear market, things go belly up sometimes. And I think this time is no different, right? We've seen so many of these treasury companies, their stocks drop 99%, 90%. You see some stocks, I mean, just pivot completely away from the treasury strategy 100%. So yes, I told you guys this was going to happen in October. I said that the capitulation events that you're going to see this Bitcoin bear market are going to be the treasury companies ultimately selling Bitcoin, and the pressure is going to be on the treasury companies. And that's exactly what is happening, right? I called this in October. I stick through it. Now, I think the question on everybody's minds, though, before I pivot, I shift it back to Opti, is when is this going to end, right? Because I think this is the question, like, when is this going to end? And I'm going to stick to my guns. I think that if Bitcoin continues to channel between the 80 and 60K region over the summer, I think that there's a high probability that we've bottomed, right? And when you bottom, there's nowhere else to go but up, which is really, really good news. So what I'm really going to be paying attention to is, what is the price of Bitcoin going to do in June, for the rest of June, and what is the price of Bitcoin going to do for the rest of July? And I think that's really what's ultimately going to determine, where the price of Bitcoin ends up by the end of the year. The good news is that I think we're around 70% through the bear market. I think, we've gone through it. The bad news is that the end of the bear market tends to be the capitulation, right? Tends to be the worst part of it, right? So we've gone through most of it, but we potentially have not gone through the capitulation phase yet. And that's really what I'm going to be keeping an eye out on specifically for the next couple of months, right? So let's see what Bitcoin does over the summer. Again, I think the Saylor FUD and the everyone beating on Saylor, I think if you're the king of the castle and everybody's upset, as Opti said, you're going to get, the pitchforks and the torches, and you're going to be like, what's going on here, right? If we were in a bull market, everyone would be the #1 Saylor fan, right? Because I think strategy would be performing really well. I think stretch would be on par with at $100. But again, I think a lot of people believed in Saylor, so to speak, and his marketing, and I think that's a lot where the frustration comes from. Now, I did see a clip of him on on Natalie's podcast on Coin Stories, and he was basically making the case that, listen, if it wasn't for Wall Street getting involved, Bitcoin would have never made it to $100,000. And the next case that he's making is basically like, look, like, if we really want Bitcoin to continue to grow from here, you're going to want banks. You're going to want sovereign wealth funds. You're going to want nation states. Like, you're going to want these things. And because that's the only way for Bitcoin to get from 1% to 5% to 10% of global assets. And I don't know how I feel about that. right? Because ultimately what Saylor's doing is that he's designing products for those different pools of capital, right? So let's see what happens. I think everyone's paying attention, to say the least, and you know, let's see how it plays out.
Yeah, I mean, look, before I get into the stretch product, I do want to give you an update on where the current price action is. I'm obviously, and to elaborate on that clip, Saylor was kind of taking a lot of shots at the quote Bitcoin fundamentalists, us idealists that thought that everyone would be running nodes and doing peer-to-peer payments. And even though I fall into that camp, I do also always fall back on that How Finney tweet that was like a week after the Bitcoin network was released. And it's basically saying, look, Bitcoin's going to get financialized. It is what it is. We all know the classic shitcoin rhetoric and, you know, bad mouthing of Bitcoin, that it only does 7 or 8 transactions, you know, like it's not going to be able to scale. The entire financial world will not be able to get on the Bitcoin network. And so I do fall into the camp of layers. I think layers is how Bitcoin's going to work. And part of it, in my mind, is these Wall Street products are sort of layers on Bitcoin. Now, obviously, we always recommend that you buy Bitcoin spot, take it into self-custody. But I think if Bitcoin was going to become financialized, it was going to happen in some fashion that we're seeing right now. Now, keeping it moving because we are going a little bit. Let's go into the stretch product here. So here's the monthly chart on STRC. Let's be honest, guys, it looks pretty brutal. Okay, this is the worst month in its history of the product. But let's go into the daily chart here, because that'll give us a little more information. But the monthly one just looks brutal. All right, it's been a pretty bad stretch here since about June 2nd. So about 20 days. Horrible month here. All right, but you can see that after Thursday, yes, it was a really bad day, worst day in history for the product, but it has seemed like the stretch investors are feeling a little more comfortable here. Monday morning, it is going back up. It is currently at what? Let's see. Currently at 90, well, a little under 90. So it looks like it's going to rebound. I actually saw Fong Lee tweet here. He goes, I bought another million of stretch today. We'll hold until it reaches par, likely longer. So I think the market panicked a little bit. I think the investors of stretch panicked a little bit. And we're starting to see, as we were talking about on Thursday, I believe it was, that it's probably going to rebound. Now, the timing on the rebound, no one really knows. Obviously, that is the big if, but it looks like it's on its way back up. It will most likely hit par again very soon. And this will be, as everyone was saying, just a stress test on the stretch product in the peak of a bear market. So again, full circle here. Is MicroStrategy really in trouble? No, from my opinion, no. I think, as I said, a lot of people are just maybe losing confidence in Saylor's marketing and his pitches. And then I think the market's just got spooked on stretch. So even though we do not recommend you buy the Bitcoin stonks, we are spot Bitcoin maxis. If you are an MSTR holder, if you are a stretch holder, is there really any concern to panic? I don't think so. I think it's just one of those, stormy moments where the waves are getting big, you're getting scared, and I think some people panicked. And hey, if you are in that market, I think you're going to be very happy here soon. So that's kind of the update on the stretch product. It is interesting that Saylor and Strategy kind of came out and said, yeah, like we are diluting the MSTR common stockholders right now to protect the stretch product. Is that going to be an even bigger controversy, or is everyone just kind of tired? I'm personally kind of having Saylor fatigue. And I saw someone say, that you guys say buy Bitcoin and that you're talking about Bitcoin stocks. And it's like, guys, this is Bitcoin news. Yes, we don't recommend you buy the stonks, but this is what's currently happening in the space, and everyone is looking at Saylor. That's what's happening right now. And so that's what we're going to cover. It is what it is, guys. Anyways. Let's see. Oh, Uncle Jack Cruz in the chat. Let's go. What do you say? Saylor buys and Wall Street buys are not the key to the 100K price. fiat failing would have gotten us home without his. I kind of agree with Uncle Jack. I kind of agree with that. 100%. All right, Nico. Let's keep it moving. Actually, what Saylor fatigue is real, right? I think this is where we are right now. It's just Saylor fatigue, bear market, Saylor fatigue. What do you got for the rest of the show? Because
yeah, we got some news.
Oh, actually, we do have a big announcement for us today.
We do have a big announcement for you guys today. It's going to be a little bit of a surprise.
We started a little late, so it's gonna happen a little sooner.
It's going to be a little bit of a surprise. We'll tell you guys right after the break. But it's a big deal, so get excited. Anyways, we'll be right back just after the break.
Here's the part that nobody says out loud. Buying Bitcoin on an exchange and leaving it there isn't buying Bitcoin. It's buying an IOU. And the last decade has been a masterclass in what happens when those exchanges don't deliver on their promises.
Bitcoin Well is a self-custody Bitcoin platform. That means that when you buy Bitcoin, it goes straight to your self-custody Bitcoin wallet. You actually own it from the very first transaction. They're available both in the United States and Canada. Pricing is transparent, straightforward, and no nonsense. And if you're buying a larger amount of Bitcoin, Bitcoin Well Infinite gives you concierge-level support through a dedicated executive Bitcoin advisor, premium help for when it actually matters.
You can also stack a little extra through the referral and wishing well rewards. A nice bonus on top of the owning your own Bitcoin thing. So go to bitcoinwell.com/simply and sign up for the Bitcoin Well portal today and buy Bitcoin you actually own. Paper burns, paper floods, paper fades. If your seed phrase is written on paper, it's not really backed up. It's waiting to disappear. Stampseed's DIY kit lets you hammer your seed words directly into commercial grade titanium. Fireproof, crush-proof, waterproof, and permanent. Once your words are in the metal, they aren't going anywhere. Use code SIMPLY at stampseed.com for 15% off anything in the store. That's stampseed.com, code SIMPLY.
All right, everybody, we are back. At the time of recording, the Bitcoin price is $64,510. Block height, 954,869. Market cap, 1.29 trillion. Bitcoin versus gold market cap, 4.29%, and decline from all-time high. Currently at a 50% discount. So if you're buying Bitcoin right now, you're getting it at a 50% discount. Anyways, before we make our announcement, I do kind of want to get into this a little bit. I don't know if you covered it, Opti. I covered it last week, Opti, while I was gone. But there's a little bit of a shot across the bow. Apparently in Illinois, the governor has signed a 0.2% tax on crypto transactions into law, including transfers between personal wallets. So, again, what is the reason for this? I think that's the big question. The reason for this, in my humble opinion, is they just don't want they don't want people using Bitcoin peer to peer. I think that's really what it comes down to. And you know, they're willing to use the heavy hand of government in order to get that outcome. Now, it does remind me of a passage from the book The Sovereign Individual. And again, I think it's really fitting. This book was written in the 90s, lacking their accustomed scope to inflate. Governments, even in traditionally civil countries, will turn nasty. Businesses that offer services that facilitate the realization of autonomy by individuals will be subject to infiltration, sabotage, and disruption. Arbitrary forfeiture of property, already commonplace in the United States, where it occurs 5,000 times a week, will become even more pervasive. Governments will violate human rights, censor the free flow of information, sabotage useful technologies, and worse. So we kind of have to zoom out here and just talk about this a little bit, right? So what does all this mean? At the end, fundamentally, Bitcoin is peer-to-peer. It's peer-to-peer money. I would say it's better money than fiat money, right? So what is the best way to de-incentivize people to use an alternative? Because I think all governments, by the way, including the United States, are moving full speed ahead into deploying a digital version of their own fiat currency. Some are worse, some are better, et cetera, et cetera. But it's the continuation of the fiat system in the digital realm, aka central bank digital currencies. So when you see governments jail the Samurai wallet developers for making open source software, when you see governments proposing a 0.2% tax on transactions, right? This is the way that they're sabotaging, quote unquote, useful technologies, right? And fundamentally, you want to zoom out, and here's another breaking story coming out of Utah. Utah is the first state to enact a limited VPN ban to enforce its age check law. So if you look at the United Kingdom, if you look at Australia, right, they're all trying to get people to quote unquote verify your age to use the internet. They're moving full steam ahead with digital IDs. And the reason they all need this stuff is because if you're trapped in this pen, that the only way you can interact with the internet is through identification. The only way that you can interact with money is through identification. They can continue the coercive system of which is fiat. They can continue it. And this is exactly what I'm seeing happen, but this is not surprising whatsoever, because ultimately this is the separation of money and state. And I think a lot of us got distracted with the traditional finance side of Bitcoin. When Bitcoin got integrated with traditional finance, some of us got distracted with the mission. Like, what was the ultimate mission of Bitcoin? The ultimate mission of Bitcoin is the separation of money and state. That is the ultimate goal. That is the ultimate mission of Bitcoin, right? This is what Satoshi envisioned. This is what all of us have envisioned. And it looks like we got a little bit of a detour, but again, in the separation of money and state, if a big portion of the state's revenue comes from printing money itself, you don't think that they would react? You don't think that they would use the heavy hand of government to, tax, quote unquote, peer-to-peer transactions? In the EU, they're basically making any peer-to-peer transaction over $10,000 illegal, right? So again, all of this is to keep you within the pen. All of this is to keep you within the fiat system. That is the goal. That's what they intend to do. That's what they're doing. And if you think that these attacks will stop, I got a bridge to sell you. This is going to continue to happen. This is going to continue to accelerate. We lived through the separation of information and the state. That was when they tried to censor social media. That was when the Twitter files got released. The Twitter files were basically claiming that, hey, there was pressure from the United States government on social media platforms to censor certain type of information blatantly against the First Amendment. Now we're in the next phase. The next phase is the separation of money and state. And in the separation of money and state, things are going to get a little bit nastier. And the reason things are going to get nastier is because governments get a tremendous amount of power from being able to issue their own currencies and being able to control the money flows. And ultimately, they can use all the scary language. It's for the kids. It's for your own safety. But ultimately, it comes down to them wanting the unique ability of being able to create money for free that everyone else has to work for. So we can give you guys all the data. We can give you guys all the information. VPN ban, tax on every Bitcoin/crypto transaction, right? But ultimately, it comes down to one simple theme. They want to keep their control over money. And my question for you is, as a sovereign individual, as if you live in the United States, is that truly freedom? If the government gets to choose what money you use, is that freedom? And then it's not only the government choosing what money you use, the money that you use has baked in inflation. So it's like they're literally forcing you to use a money that is designed to lose purchasing power. If that is not a new form of slavery, I don't know what else is. And that's the key point here. So we have to pay attention to these things. They're going to continue to develop. And then I think the following question, the natural question to that is, how do you fight it? How do you fight against that? The way that you fight against that is you stop paying attention to all the bells and whistles. You stop paying attention to TradFi, and you focus on one thing: buying Bitcoin, earning Bitcoin, mining Bitcoin, and putting that Bitcoin into self-custody. If enough of us do that, we win. That's it. full stop. Bitcoin ultimately is designed to be used peer-to-peer. It is not designed to be used via a custodian. And I think this is the lesson that we all forgot this previous cycle. So I'm going to end it with that, and then we'll go to the next segment. We'll be right back just after the break, and we're going to make a very special announcement, which I'm extremely excited about. We're going to be right back in just a second. I want to give a shout out to our partner, Ledin. Here's something most Bitcoin holders never figure out until it's too late. You're sitting on wealth you can't touch without selling. Ledin fixes that. Bitcoin-backed loans. You keep your stack, you get cash. And they just introduced their lowest rates ever. No complexity, no fine print. The larger the loan, the lower the rate. These new rates apply to all new loans, refinances, and renewals. You'll see all the rates up front before you apply. The new, lower rates come with Ledin's gold standard protection. Your Bitcoin remains custodied and is never lent out for interest. Perfect 8-year track record of keeping clients' assets safe. Auto top-ups, LTV alerts, and partial repayments to keep you in control. Repay whenever you want with zero penalties or monthly payments. Ledin's perfect $10 billion track record through every market cycle in the last 8 years speaks for itself. Don't choose between a great rate and the safety of your Bitcoin. Get both at Ledin. If you ever thought, what happens to my Bitcoin if something happens to me? Or what happens if I lose my phone? You're not alone. For a lot of people, the biggest barrier to self-custody isn't buying Bitcoin. It's the fear of making a mistake. And that's why I like Bitkey, and I recommend it to my friends and family. Bitkey is a Bitcoin wallet built for real life, not just for day one, but for everything that happens in between. Lost devices, upgrades, accidents, and long-term ownership. There's no seed phrase to write down and worry about losing, and no single point of failure that can lock you out of your Bitcoin forever. What really stands out about Bitkey is the peace of mind. Recovery is built in. Inheritance is built in. It's a complete self-custody system built by the team behind Square and Cash App, designed to make holding your own Bitcoin simpler and safer. Take self-custody of your Bitcoin today using Bitkey. Go to bitkey.world and use promo code SIMPLY for 10% off your new Bitkey. That's bitkey.world, promo code SIMPLY. I want to give a shout out to our partner, HIVE Digital Technologies. Fueled by clean energy across 3 continents, HIVE runs dual engines, Bitcoin mining and AI compute. Their AI platform is ranked #1 in the world for network performance, and it's doing something bigger than compute. It's accelerating human discovery, the science, the breakthroughs, pushing humanity further and faster. Listed on the NASDAQ with the ticker HIVE. Catch the latest buzz at HIVE Digital Tech on X or HIVEdigitaltech.com.
You secured your Bitcoin, but did you secure your devices too? They're still broadcasting your location and digital footprint. GPS, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, cell, 5G, EMF, all of it is leaking. Escape Zone fixes that. Their Faraday bags block every signal your device emits, so you decide when you're detectable, not the grid. Built for Bitcoiners who know sovereignty isn't just your wallet. It's your phone, your hardware wallet, your keys, and your entire digital life. Go to escapezone.com/simply and use code SIMPLY for 10% off. That's escapezone.com/simply, code SIMPLY.
All right, everybody, major announcement today. We got the one, the only, Mike Germano is joining the Simply Bitcoin team. Super hyped. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we've been working in stealth the last couple weeks or so, but we're super hyped to have Mike on the team. Mike has an incredible resume. He helped Bitcoin Magazine be built into what it is today. And of course, he was part of Vice Media. Vice was a major media conglomerate in its heyday. And we're super excited to have Mike on the team. Now, one thing that I did want to mention, and this goes back to the theme that I was talking about earlier. I think what happened this previous cycle is people have forgotten why we're here. People have forgotten the revolutionary aspects of Bitcoin. People have forgotten the fact that what you got to do as a Bitcoiner is stay humble, stack sats, and put those sats into self-custody. And I think a lot of those lessons were forgotten. There was this big distraction with the TradFi getting involved in Bitcoin, but people forgot the fundamentals. People forgot the revolution. And we're super happy to have Mike here in order to retell that story to the community, because I think it's very, very needed. Mike, happy to have you on the show and happy to have you on board.
Yo, thank you, Nico. Thank you, Opti. Excited to be on the live stream. I figure if I was going to make an announcement, why would I not be making it on Simply Bitcoin live stream? So I'm the guy who's usually behind the cameras, not always in front of the cameras, but I've always not only believed in the Bitcoin story, but even at Vice Media, when we were covering Bitcoin in 2013, in 2016, was really advocating for it, where I got it and originally met with the folks over at Bitcoin Magazine, was proud of everything that I've built over at Bitcoin Magazine as a media company. But the really exciting reason I got into Bitcoin was not for corporate adoption, but for the adoption by the people. And I've always loved the story that is about Bitcoin. I've always felt we need a better champion for how we tell that story. We're at a crossroads right now where we have Calvin Ayers funding movies in Hollywood to tell his side of Bitcoin. We have nothing but, Bitcoin ETF watches that are happening all the time. And really, where's the platform for the plebs? Where's the voice of the culture that's brought us here? Bitcoin's the greatest grassroots marketing engine that the world's ever seen. And we got to make sure that we fight to make sure there's a media company to have that voice. And I've helped a lot of media companies in the space. I love storytelling. I love trying to elevate the Bitcoin storytellers to, more mainstream, so that we can get, we can save some pre-coiners and get them into the fold and get them into the community. And when I was looking, around and building this, obviously been a fan of Simply for a long time. And, this opportunity came up, just by the numbers. Simply Bitcoin is the most watched live show, not just on YouTube, but you have the pulse of the community. You have the proof of work. You've been doing it. You have the episodes, you have the hours. No one even comes close over the last year to the views that Simply Bitcoin has. And in my opinion, I expect big things. I want to build as much as mainstream culture can start accepting what's happening in this Bitcoin movement. But I believe, especially even in the bear market, that our Bitcoin culture is exciting. There's a large reason why people want to be part of it. A lot of people might be lost, whether that's politically or frustrated with how the economics are going. And you start to come into the, meet other Bitcoiners that are curious, that are excited. The energy is positive. We might yell at each other online all the time, but the truth is, some of the people who are building some of the best things out there in the world are doing it with Bitcoin, because of Bitcoin, or inspired by Bitcoin. And those stories not only need to be told, I believe it's the next generation of Bitcoiners that are going to be coming in aren't just going to be coming in because they hear about Bitcoin. They're going to be coming in because of stories about what Bitcoiners are able to do. So, I was proud of building some of the most watched products the world's ever seen in the Bitcoin space over at Bitcoin Magazine, and building, the mining live desk, to our live stream, to fighting, in Norwegian courts to make sure we could cover the Hodl versus Craig Wright trial. But that's the same type of passion I'm going to bring here to Simply Bitcoin. Simply Bitcoin isn't just a live show, isn't just a bunch of YouTube videos. But if you look at the hosts that we have, this is really a network. And there's a changing of the guard that's now going to be happening in the storytelling, in media, in Bitcoin. And I believe that that's going to be at Simply Bitcoin. So I'm excited for what I'm going to be able to build with it. Already an unbelievable team. And it's just about taking that to the next level. And I'm just the old guy who's done it before a couple times, and really excited to do it here.
Wait. Can I say something? All right, guys, look, I'm going to keep myself off screen for a reason here, but we have Nico on the right side, the young version, and in the final form.
I love it. But yeah, dude, we're super honored to have you on the team, Mike. And with your experience, I think it's time for us to really get the message back on track, right? Because I think that there has been a ton of distractions in terms of Bitcoin being integrated into the traditional financial system, which again, I think is a natural part of its evolution, right? Ultimately, Bitcoin's going to be adopted by everyone. That's the thesis. But I think in a lot of that, I think people got distracted on what the mission is here, right? And the mission ultimately is the separation of money and state. This is ultimately a revolution. This is about individuals reclaiming back their financial sovereignty, using Bitcoin in self-custody, peer-to-peer with other individuals. And here at Simply Bitcoin, we've been beating this battle drum for 6 years now. And we hope that over the next 5 years or so, we're going to continue to tell that story. We're going to continue to be the front and center of the culture of what Bitcoin is really all about. And we're going to continue to advocate for individuals taking self-custody, and by doing so, reclaiming back their financial sovereignty. And we're going to do it via the best way that we know how, which is amazing storytelling and creating amazing content. And of course, we have Mike to help us here to do just that. Opti, do you have some words?
Well, I think I've told Mike this. I want to tell a story here. Story time here with Mike. I've said this behind the scenes, but I haven't said it publicly to everyone. I remember, I believe it was Bitcoin Miami 2021. And I was hanging out with Joe. I was hanging out with Joe at the conference, and he called me up after the conference was over, and he's like, "Hey, yo, like, I'm at the Bitcoin Magazine hotel. Like, come to the pool. Like, let's hang out. We're not going to see each other for a while. Just come hang out with us." And I was like, "All right, cool. Go hang out with my friend." After the Miami conference, I'm like, what a good weekend. And I remember, this moment sticks in my head now because it's a full circle. And I was there, and I remember Joe being like, hush, like, yo, like, that guy, he works at Vice. We're hiring him at Bitcoin Mag. I'm like, yo, no way. Like, I love Vice. And that's like before I met Germano, and I was like, yo, like, Vice Media coming to Bitcoin Mag. Like, this is awesome. We're really going to take it to the next level. You did amazing stuff there. But it really popped back in my head when we started talking again. I'm like, yo, full circle. 2021 was just like a unknown pleb, not even in the business. I remember being at the Bitcoin Mag hotel, and it was like, yo, the guy from Vice is here. He's going to take Bitcoin Mag mainstream. And now I'm like, yo, now Mike works with us. Like, how did Nico and I create something to have the OG Germano hanging out with us? So, I mean, I'm super hyped. I love the energy that Germano brings. And I think it was much needed for us, because I say it all the time, Nico's tapped out over here. We need to alleviate some of that stress for him so he can come back on the show. And it's like, what better than having Mike Germano join us, who's done this before? We're just a couple of idiots that, I don't know, had a show that got popular, and we're like, we have no idea what we're doing here. We have literally no clue. So I'm super hyped to have Mike here with us.
Absolutely. I want to bring the conversation back to the culture side of things, and going back to the fundamentals, Mike, because I think this is really, really important. And I think what we've seen, particularly in this cycle, since the approval of the spot Bitcoin ETF, and then, of course, just traditional finance, like all these treasury companies popping up left and right. I'm going to caveat this with, I have no problem with that. And if Bitcoin does become the global reserve asset, it was an inevitability that these things would happen. But ultimately, we have to remember our roots. We have to remember why we're here. If it's not Bitcoin media advocating for peer-to-peer self-custody transactions, who else is going to do that, right? So we really want to focus on that. And we're really excited to have Mike on board, because I think he's really going to take us to the next level.
Look, thank you guys. And Opti, I appreciate that story time. And the truth was, in 21, you knew there was a moment where Bitcoin Magazine, obviously that conference was unbelievable. And going there and relaunching the print magazine, taking long form journalism seriously, because most importantly, these are important stories to tell what everyone else is doing. There's a handful of us that are lucky enough to make our career out of making content about Bitcoin. That's a huge responsibility. And what you guys have done out of just like grit and will and building up that audience, there's a big trust with that audience. A lot of us came here not because we loved Wall Street. It was because we wanted to build something different. And those voices and stories, I think, are very compelling. And if we're going to be looking at the next wave of the next 100 million Bitcoiners, how are they coming in? And we need to be highlighting those stories. I take extreme responsibility for how we utilize the great advertisers that give us the funds to make all this possible, and what are we delivering back to the millions of Bitcoiners that are looking for that content. And especially in a bear market is where culture is the most important, right? Fine, we're going to argue about BIP all day, and we're going to have all these other arguments about Michael Saylor selling a couple of coins, but how are we making sure that when the number goes down on the price of Bitcoin, that the number goes up in terms of viewership, in terms of community, in terms of vibes, in terms of friends? Like, we're, you know, you're part of the Bitcoin family. You know, like you brought up Joe Rogers, you know, you brought up all these other people that are not just in the industry, but are in the Bitcoin community. We're here to fight for it. We're lucky that we get to do the thing we love, you know, and get paid for it in the Bitcoin industry. But that's an even bigger responsibility for what we're able to produce. And, you know, as you said, Nico's flying back from Europe. He's half tired. I love doing kind of business, and I love putting fighting for content creators. That's what I did over at Vice and Bitcoin Magazine and even at PubKey. And to do that here is important because you guys still have to make a great show. You still have to make content. You just need now to have the army behind that to build up not just the business, the partnerships, but, you know, I want to attack mainstream media, right? I'm happy people went after and got, you know, politicians on board. I'm happy they got Wall Street on board. Who's orange pilling Hollywood? Who's orange pilling Madison Avenue, right? Who's orange pilling those institutions? We should be infecting those institutions. And when I want them to look at who's making the best content out there, it's going to be Simply Bitcoin. And we already have a slate of shows. I mean, if you're not watching Hurley's show or Dante's show, that's great. I might not lead with Rustin's show, but, you know, we have another channels for that. And, you know, you know, I have a good partnership with some tinfoil hat makers I'm excited about. But, you know, I would say that little things like even putting the Bitcoin logo on Crocs and selling it, as much as people laughed about it, that was sending signal to the rest of mainstream culture that, you know, Bitcoin is, of course, a currency or asset that you can take self-custody of, but it's also a movement. It's also a movement that's not going away. It's also a movement backed by not just energy, it's a movement backed by passionate people who feel connected about this, and are going to buy everything from Bitcoin Crocs to Pez dispensers to making, you know, little hodlers. That's one thing, but they're putting their hard-earned money into Bitcoin. And they believe in it. They're willing to go to a bar in New York and sit for hours listening to conversations, or fly all around the world to go to conferences. And they're also willing to every year, they're also willing every year to every day listen to a show like this. So, you know, I look at my responsibility of getting more ammo for the Simply Bitcoin army here to go to war with that, to make sure that the rest of the media out there understands not only what we're making, but how do we distribute that. You know, I think that, you know, getting audiences, you know, trying to get the viewership 50 million more viewers is something that we should be looking to do. And I believe that Simply Bitcoin also has the best voice in trying to have that conversation. So, you know, I think it's important for us to get there before and help tell that story and help be a better platform for the rest of the of content creators in the Bitcoin space and those independent voices before, you know, I don't know, it gets bought and sold and commoditized to someone else.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Well, guys, again,
wait. I got one last question. On that note, Mike, do you think the heyday of Bitcoin media is behind us, or is it in the infancy? Have we still not even seen the ceiling of Bitcoin media? What is your take on just the overall space right now?
Look, the reason why I spent the last 5 years trying to convince more of the mainstream media folks, saying, look at this. Look what is happening in this community. There's over 100 million active people around the world. Like, this is everything you could ask for. And honestly, traditional media kept just, I felt, turning their back on it, thinking that this was a fad, or it's not really that big of a deal. Or then they would get caught up with some, you know, shitcoin stuff and start looking at like, oh, well, we can make our own NFTs here. Or, you know, FTX went down. And so the larger media companies had no idea what was really happening in this space. And look, whether it was Donald Trump, you know, Donald Trump might come and speak at the Bitcoin conference. When we were there, that was over 1 billion media impressions. 1 billion. This isn't a joke. 1 billion media impressions. And so everyone started to take attention to it. I think that, truthfully, Bitcoin storytelling and Bitcoin media hasn't even reached 10% of what it should. The reason why I've dedicated my life to this is, you know, for example, I'm in the middle of working with some of the folks over who created the show, Entourage, and working with Netflix and HBO on creating a TV series, right? I've been working on that for a couple months, and those conversations where all of a sudden they're starting to realize, oh, this is a really active, valuable community, and oh, these are our original stories, and this is very unique. We haven't even scratched the surface yet of getting great video content of some of the unbelievable things that are happening within Bitcoin. So we are at, like level 2 in terms of, this live show is great, and, it's filmed in a studio, but we haven't even really gone out there to truly capture those stories, bring those back. And, look, I'm here because it's reminiscent of Vice in the early days, and there's nothing more exciting than capturing great stories and making sure millions of people can see that. And that I think we absolutely have in front of us. I mean, I think maybe it doesn't matter if other companies got lost or if other companies are going in different directions. That doesn't matter, right? The culture is still going to need and deserves to have great storytellers who are willing to fight for it. And if no one else is going to do it, we have to do it.
Absolutely. 100% agree with that. Ultimately, guys, Simply Bitcoin's mission is moving the cultural needle for worldwide Bitcoin adoption. And I think there was a little bit, some distractions this cycle. And it's time to move that needle in a more positive direction, right? More towards the culture, and actually mint Bitcoiners, right? Like actual Bitcoiners, or taking Bitcoin, put it into self-custody, using it peer-to-peer, because ultimately that's how we win, right? Like if you have, large banks adopting Bitcoin, fantastic. You have SpaceX adding Bitcoin to its treasury, it's fantastic. But ultimately, Bitcoin was created for the people. Bitcoin was created for you to be using it peer-to-peer. Bitcoin was not created for you to leave it with a custodian. Bitcoin was not created for you to use it using an intermediary. Bitcoin was literally created as a response to the 2008, 2009 financial crisis, because Satoshi knew that ultimately governments were going to create more money, and he needed to create a resilient peer-to-peer protocol that could not be stopped. And I think people have forgotten the characteristics. They've forgotten the fundamentals. So we're here to essentially remind people what the Bitcoin culture is all about, what the original mission is all about. And that's what we're going to continue to do. And that's exactly why Mike is here. Anyways, before we wrap up today's show, I do want to give a very special shout out to our conference sponsor, Mining Disrupt 2026. It's coming up in Miami, Florida. You're not going to want to miss it. July 21st through the 23rd. Get your tickets now before the prices increase. You can use promo code SimplyBitcoin to get 20% off your tickets. Anyways, guys, if you guys enjoyed today's show, you know what to do. Smash the like button, consider subscribing, and we'll see you tomorrow for a brand new episode of Simply Bitcoin Live.
Today's episode was brought to you by BitcoinWell.com, a Bitcoin-only platform on a mission to enable financial independence.